Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel presentation. My name is Dr. Charles Chuck Chesnavage. I'm president of the Westchester Coalition Against Islamophobia. Once again, I appreciate everyone's patience with our technical difficulties as we are trying to have this panel presentation via Zoom. I'd like to introduce everyone to WCAI, which is a grassroots association of concerned individuals, both non-Muslim and Muslim, committed to opposing bigotry and discrimination against Islam and its faithful, and to defending the civil rights of all. We are here this afternoon with a special panel presentation, and we condemn any type of persecution, religious persecution, any type of persecution against people in the world, in whatever country that persecution may be occurring. Every religion believes in peace. Within Hinduism, ahimsa is to do no wrong. In Judaism, shalom. In Islam, salam. And so we gather today in a spirit of peace. I would now like to introduce our moderator for today, Janesh, who will be introducing the speakers and letting everyone know the ground rules for today's presentation. Janesh.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's event. My name is Janesh Raheem. I'm going to be moderating today's event, and I thank our president, Chuck Chesnavage, Dr. Charles Chesnavage, who provided a quick introduction today. Today's event is a discussion and a question and answer session on the Hindutva movement in India that started in 1923. The current regime in India, the ruling party, the BJP, follow this ideology very closely, and the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and the Vishva Hindu Prasad Parishad, VHP, are considered to be right-wing extremist organizations who are promoting Islamophobia, as well as other hate and persecution of other religious minorities in India, not just Muslims, but Sikhs, Jews, Christians, and Dalits as well. So we will be having a conversation today about that infiltration, not only in India, but also here in the United States as well. The Hindutva movement is very active here in the United States, and it's becoming extremely influential through lobbying groups seeking to support the far-right movement and ideology. Today, we will have 4 panelists for you. Our first speaker and panelist is going to be Kannan Srinivasan, who will be bringing his expertise on European and Indian fascism. Our next speaker will be Dr. Shaikh Ubaid. Dr. Ubaid is the president of ASPAIRE. ASPAIRE is the Alliance to Save and Protect America from Infiltration of Religious Extremists. Closely followed by our third speaker today, who will be Deepak Gupta. Deepak Gupta is the co-founder and board member of Hindus for Human Rights. And last but not least, our fourth speaker today will be Shujat Khan from the Coalition of Americans for Pluralism in India, or CAPI, as they are known for their short form. Each of our panelists will have 15 minutes to speak. Upon completion of the panelists' presentation, we will have time for some questions and answers as well as online. If you do have questions online, then please type your question in to the chat bot online. Our volunteers will be monitoring the chat online, and your question will be passed to our panel, and one of the 4 members of our panel will respond to those questions. We ask everyone in attendance today to respect the speakers. We would prefer if there are no interruptions during the speeches. We will give an opportunity for questions and answers afterwards. If you would like to help yourself to some drinks at the back, there are drinks at the back for those in the room. For everyone online, you are muted upon entry, so you will not be able to say anything if you're on the Zoom call. But again, if you do have a question, our volunteers are monitoring the chat, and you can ask your questions in the chat. Only the host will be seeing your question. Your question will not be broadcast to everybody in the Zoom meeting. Our first speaker today is going to be someone online. Chuck, if we can be ready to spotlight Kannan Srinivasan. Kannan Srinivasan will be speaking about the history and background of the book Hindutva, written by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar in 1923. This is for the rise of the Hindu right and the administration of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So he'll be speaking about the book and the current administration as well. Chuck, if we could spotlight Kannan.
Okay.
Very well. I will try and explain in at least some aspects of what's going on in India today in the light of history. And the first thing that comes to mind is just that it's an Hindu nationalist party that's in office, and the party that the Prime Minister belongs to has a considerable history over pretty much a century, and in fact more, because it's changed its name several times, and it's not it's part of a group of connected organizations which all have advanced the agenda in different fashions, and there are related organizations in this country, and they toward the same goal. They employ different strategies and present themselves differently as well. As I was saying, there's the party in office, the BJP, is connected to various others, which are also well represented in this country. So I was struck when a young woman, young American of Indian ancestry, or from a very elite family, and she's an undergraduate at an Ivy League university. She complained to me. She said that as a young woman of color, she was distressed that one of the Harvard classical imprints, which is called the Murthy Classical Library, was headed by Sheldon Pollock, because she felt this was cultural appropriation. She doesn't speak any Indian language. And Sheldon Pollock's been a scholar of Sanskrit for over 50 years, and he trained under the famous Daniel Ingalls at Harvard. And but this is a sort of argument which is so attractive, it's so seductive, and it's difficult to resist easily. And when I looked through some of the websites of Hindu American Foundation or an organization I just heard about, yesterday called, I think, Kona, Chna, I find that they have so many different terms which are all very modern and very much part of contemporary America and part of Democrat representative politics here, and which are very different from the languages they use in India, for example, and at other forums. There's a member of Society of Jesus, Cedric Prakash, who gave testimony to Congress, to a congressional committee some years ago, in which explaining some background to a congressman, he read out passages from a textbook which is still in use, still prescribed, which praised National Socialism and Hitler as a very dynamic leader. And that's the language used there in one, and used in a place where it will have a different resonance, where it would not be used here, for example. And this ability to adapt itself to a range, a variety of situations is one reason why this movement has performed so impressively all over for a long time, and why it is actually very difficult to trivialize. Now, some of these issues have been there really since the outset. The Hindu nationalist movement it grew out of, in a sense, the Indian nationalist movement itself, which was much broader, which had people from numerous communities very active in it, and from a world which, the world I grew up in India 60 years ago, for example, which didn't really seek to define community as the basis of citizenship or nationalism at all. But like Indian nationalism itself, Hindu nationalism in India was heavily inspired by European nationalism and by the European revolutionary tradition. Savarkar himself was actually an Indian nationalist in the wider sense at first. He was a revolutionary terrorist inspired by the anarchist tradition, by Kropotkin and by Mazzini and Garibaldi and by various others. And as with other Indian nationalists, they were busy trying to read these lessons into India. After he was incarcerated for an act of revolutionary terror, which was resulted in the murder of a British official, and he was deported to an Indian territory. He, with the rigors of that incarceration, he changed dramatically and turned his attention from Britain as the colonial occupying power to Islam as the main enemy, and identified the threat from the Ottomans and from, in fact, from Turkey as the main cause for concern, and begged for mercy and offered to fight against that enemy, Islam. And this was his stand the rest of his life, that the single enemy was Islam. And toward this end, he turned to European nationalism again in the more virulent form it had taken by the 1920s, and was greatly inspired by Mussolini. And a brilliant Italian scholar, Marzia Casolari, has written in great detail about this and how
10 minutes, Kannan, 10 minutes. You have 5 minutes left, please. Thank
5
you.
minutes left. Okay, fine. So at this point, they set about this sort of attempt to integrate these lessons into India, and they found it not at first easy because there wasn't a strong sense of Hindu identity strong enough to build a fascist movement. And for that end, he saw that the key thing was the elimination of caste, so there could be one large homogeneous Hindu community. So India today, which has enormous caste deprivation, is still able to use communities which are greatly suffering in the country as its foot soldiers in attacking Muslims. And that, I think, is an important change and in understanding. But he migrated then to what seemed the more dynamic fascist power. And I think he explained something important, which is relevant to how we see them today. After Kristallnacht, he gave a series of speeches after Kristallnacht took place, and of course was well recorded and in the press throughout the world, including India. He said, what's the message here? Is it, it's the message is really that a state belongs to a nation. The Jews are not the German nation. The Germans are the German nation. And therefore, the Germans have the right to do whatever they please to the Jews. And he elaborated on this because the argument he didn't seek to make was that there's something bad about the Jews. He said it's just that they don't have a right to exist because they are not German. And by that token, he said, the Muslims too are not Indian. This was his consistent position. And the party, until very recently, has not been able to say this openly. It says so openly today, and it is now much more directly able to speak to what have always been its important concerns. So, gun rights from the 1930s seemed to him central. And he spoke of gun ownership as very important. I remember in the early 90s, an important member of this party, who was one of the party intellectuals apparently, and who is a former revolutionary communist, he went to Russia to explore the Russian rights. The Indian ambassador has posted photographs of himself with Steve Bannon as his hero. So I think at this level, they're quite open, and it's very easy to find lots of material in which they identify very clearly with the international right, which is so well represented in the Republican Party by Mr. Trump, by Mr. Bannon and other people here, in terms which are very familiar to everybody. At another level, they've learned this language of cultural appropriation and all sorts of signaling. And at yet another level, they speak differently in the language of fairly direct power in India, in terms which are all too familiar to those subject to coercion. So,
excuse me, Kannan, excuse me, the 15 minutes has expired. So I thank you.
Shall I just wind up in a sentence?
Yes, the 15 minutes has expired.
Then I'll stop right here. I think this pretty much is the important stuff.
You could finish your point. Please finish your point, and we'll move on to our next speaker, Shujat Khan.
I think, therefore, one must be alive to how this movement functions across the spectrum, and irrespective of all these presentations, see the questions of civil rights in India as independent of any other statements of culture and history and other things, and concern ourselves with human rights in India as we would in any country, anywhere in the world, as we would in human rights in the United States.
Okay, thank you, Kannan Srinivasan, who was speaking a little bit there about the European and Indian fascism and gave us a quick introduction. One of our speakers is running a little bit late, so we're going to change the order of our speakers. Next, we will have Shujat Khan, who is going to be speaking. Shujat Khan is from the Coalition of Americans for Pluralism in India, CAPI, C-A-P-I. So, Chuck, if we could spotlight Shujat Khan. And Shujat, if you can hear me, please let me know.
I can, Janesh. I can. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Okay, so if we could spotlight Shujat.
All right. Thank you so very much. Hello, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's joining. My name is Shujat Khan, and I'm a resident of Michigan. And I'm honored and privileged to be joining the Westchester Coalition Against Islamophobia. My due regards to Chuck Chesnavage, to Janesh, and to all of the other people, the members of this coalition. Thank you very much. A very good evening to all again. What I would like to go through is a follow-up item that Kannan was saying. And one quick thing before I start my own presentation. Hopefully everyone can see the screen here. So I wanted to share and bring a good conclusion to what Kannan was trying to present. This is a book called A Bunch of Thoughts by M.S. Golwalkar. And the founder of RSS, Dr. Keshav Baliram Hegdewar, after he passed away, the charge of RSS came down to Mr. Golwalkar, popularly known as Guruji. He is the author, and these are his bunch of thoughts. And to press home the point that what we are talking about today is not a figment of any imagination, I would like to point that this bunch of thoughts, the ideology of the very second, after the founder, the second in charge, If you focus on part 2 of the book, the agenda, and you come down to item number 16, it explicitly calls out what in his thoughts, among his bunch of thoughts, as internal threats, and they are the Muslims and the Christians. So this, what we're saying today, is not, or what Kannan has said is not, debatable. I mean, it is right down in black and white that says that the Muslims of India specifically, and how India, the Hindu Rashtra and minorities, how to deal with them. So I encourage the Westchester Coalition members who are interested in knowing more about this to read this book and understand. Now, with that having taken away a couple minutes of my time, I would like to really rush in and show to you what I have. So again, Coalition of Americans for Pluralism in India is a nonprofit registered to educate the American politicians and people, the good people of this country, about what's going on in India and how its effects are going to have dramatic, impact on India. And India is by no means, my beloved birthplace of India is something that is unique. Its number of languages, its composition, the amalgamation of different religions over time, and it has survived challenges. But will it survive this challenge of Hindutva? That is the main question. It has survived invasions, it has survived colonialism, it has survived as a brand new infant country, but will this survive and still be, because every one of us in CAPI, wish that India were to get to its well-deserved place on the world stage, a bright, shining star showing the world how the largest democracy takes everybody along and does not leave anybody behind. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be in the weather forecast as far as what we all know. So having said that, I had a few slides prepared myself, but I'm not going to go through them because the topic has been touched upon. But, in a nutshell, what is Hindutva? Well, that ideology, there is nothing wrong with a Muslim wanting to have more Muslimness in them. There is nothing wrong with the Hindu wanting to have more Hindu-ness in them. Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, there's nothing wrong in a Christian wanting to be more Christian than what they were yesterday. We all have to improve. We all have to get better as life goes on, and we do in many cases. But that cannot be at the expense of others. That cannot be at the expense of peace. That cannot be at the expense of individual liberties. So Hindutva, which is usually loosely translated as Hindu-ness, it's great to want to be a better person from what I was yesterday. But does that mean that me wanting to be better has to do away with lives or property or liberties of others? That is not acceptable and should never be accepted. So as part of that belief of wanting to be supreme, one individual on January 30th, 1948 assassinated Mahatma Gandhi. And then fast forward through history, when President Trump visited Delhi right that day after, the capital of India, New Delhi, broke out in massive riots, and they went on for days and weeks, including about 25 places of Muslim worship burned, hundreds of our holy books burned and desecrated, and that is not the India that we want to become. We want this, again, as I said, to be a shining star on the world stage. again, I pasted a small blurb of the same agenda, or I should say, the preface legend of the book that I quoted earlier. And Hinduism is a religion, Hindutva is an ideology emanating from that peaceful religion that is now metamorphosizing into who knows what it's going to be next. How is Hindutva harmful? Well, certain elements that profess Hindutva have declared, openly declared, and have not been yet brought to justice. They have openly declared and asked for a genocide of Muslims in India to be conducted. And as Genocide Watch, Professor Gregory Stanton correctly notes that persecution level, the number 8, this is a ranking of 1 to 10, 9 being where the event happens, and then 10 is the denial after that. So we are at level 8, according to this third-party Genocide Watch organization that does this not just for India, but for a lot of other places. And our prayers are for each of those places. And no matter if it's the Muslims on the receiving end or Christians or any other community or religion, our prayers are with them that, may Allah Ta'ala make their, conditions better. Coming to the conditions of Muslims in India, USCIRF has urged the US government to add 4 countries to the list of worst religious freedom violators, and has, for the 3rd year in a row, designated India, unfortunately, as a country of particular concern for the persecutions that are happening in India today. Then let's come into the USA. There are some of these organizations that, in my mind, are disguised as social and charitable organizations. And notably of them are the HSS, VHP, and OFBJP. Now, this is on the left side, the lion standing on that orange arch with the HSS written below it. That is the logo of the HSS. HSS on its website, showcases their outreach events, showcases their outreach efforts. There's a lot of joy and gaiety and, celebration of different festivals, which is awesome. However, what is concerning is that HSS on their own website, as you can see on the left top side, hssus.org/FAQ, openly denotes that HSS is also inspired by a long lineage of Hindu movements in India, including the RSS. So HSS is the overseas wing. There is an HSS USA, there's HSS Canada, there's HSS UK. So there's HSS is everywhere in the world except India, where it's called RSS. And having seen the history and the books and the bunch of thoughts of its leaders.
10 minutes, Shujat.
Thank you. 10 minutes done, sir?
Yes, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
5 minutes, good. Thank you very much. So you can only think about what this organization and why is there a deafening silence from their part on all the persecution that happens here, in India. Some of the books that are sold on their websites, including some that have open examples of hate. Now, what I would like to showcase is that India, the way it's become today, has been the result of these efforts that have happened at the ground level. Specifically, it's called RSS, Shaka meaning a branch. That's a Sanskrit word for branch. Now, all of a sudden, people did not get inoculated with hate. This has been a growing phenomenon, and it has grown every decade, where these camps would be conducted in every neighborhood, every city, every state. What we are seeing now is that similar camps are being conducted by HSS, and they are in many, many, many places. What makes us apprehensive, extremely apprehensive, is having seen where the road led to and the path ended for the RSS, and what India and the hate and all of the third-party agencies are classifying. Are we seeing a replay of that in the USA, where all of these branches, this is Illinois, these are all of their events that closely resemble optically into what has happened and what brought India to the current situation? That concerns us, and that is a cause of concern for everybody. And we have to understand that these are happening. There are 500 branches, give or take a few, and the increase or decrease at a weekly level of HSS, which means that they are in your backyard. They are in our backyard. The VHP openly in their website, not me, and their website says that they are inspired by the same values and ideals of those followed by VHP of India. Well, what are the ideals? Well, those ideals certainly got them in the CIA list of militant organizations. Is that acceptable? Is that the American fabric? Is that part of the American fabric that we want to have sewn into and blended into? So overall consequences of not countering Hindutva in USA is the domination of right-wing hate ideology in USA against Muslims in particular. The Hindutva promoting other existing right-wing ideologues in the USA. Hindutva has been known for campaigning against known political persons from the Muslim community, infiltration of political offices leading to bias and discrimination, using HSS chakras to brainwash the innocent. And this is what I'm concerned about, is the wonderful, the skilled, the innocent children, the intellectually really, really up on the scale. I mean, every child is innocent, but when they go through some of these chakras, which have the same ideology of what you saw with the bunch of thoughts and what Kannan said and all of those, you really want them, that's not fair. I think those children's potential has to be utilized in better ways than, go through some of these chakras to get, I don't want to say, but yeah, I think you understand where I'm going is we don't want them to carry this thought process throughout their life. We need this country as well to remain what it is. And then the consequences of not countering Hindutva in USA are to influence the curriculum in US school systems, to remove references to caste supremacy, which is another big problem, and modifying the history of Muslim contributions. So this is where we typically see the juxtaposition of Sanghi is a member of the Hindutva family of organizations. When they're representing themselves at the UN or any other third, a place outside of India, we see this very nice, this well-presented side of them, where they say that we come from the land of Gandhi, which, by the way, got assassinated by their own ideologue, and Buddha. Surprisingly, India, the birthplace of Buddhism, does not have Buddhism today. I wonder what happened. It's kind of like saying Saudi Arabia will not have Islam or things like that. It's very difficult to comprehend, but there's a big history that I encourage people to read. But when they are in India, this is a manifestation of their behavior, leading to some violence and other things against minorities. So hopefully, what I have presented, my content is transparent enough. It benefits the people, the audience, the coalition itself, and hopefully it will give you an idea of why we're apprehensive that this will increase the existing Islamophobia that currently is a challenge anyway. So again, I thank the Westchester Coalition for the time, and it was a privilege to present this to you. And I'll turn it back to Janesh and Chuck.
Thank you, Shujat. I now turn it over to Janesh to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Chuck. That was, and thank you, Shujat, for that very informative presentation. A lot of people know what the RSS is, but the equivalence in this country and the infiltration in this country is what we are concerned about, especially as Americans. So this ideology is not only something that we're concerned about of what's happening in India, but we are extremely concerned with its tentacles reaching now into the US and into our elected officials, into our everyday work, everyday life. And you've seen the sort of comparison between what the RSS paramilitary training camps are and the equivalent of what's happening here in the US. So very interesting insight there from Shujat Khan from the Coalition of Americans for Pluralism in India, CAPI. I'm going to ask, Deepak Gupta is on the stage with us. I'm going to ask Dr. Shaikh Ubaid to join us on the stage. And the rest of the presentation for today will be focused on the stage, and we will have our two remaining speakers talk a little bit about the subject for today, Hindutva and the spread of Hindutva, and the persecution of all minorities, not just Muslims, but all minorities in India. So I'm going to ask, we're going to go with Dr. Shaikh first, or? Okay, so we're going to go with Dr. Shaikh Ubaid first. Dr. Shaikh Ubaid is the president of ASPAIRE, the Alliance to Save and Protect America from the Infiltration of Religious Extremists. Dr. Shaikh Ubaid will be speaking about the RSS fascist connection to Savarkar's book, the book that we mentioned at the start that created this ideology, and it's now at such a breaking point in India. He'll be talking about the pending genocide, possible genocide in India, and the growing influence of the Hindutva movement in the United States and steps to counter this movement. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Shaikh Ubaid on the stage. Would you like to speak from there or from here? Okay, so Dr. Shaikh Ubaid, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace, and thank you, Janesh, for that introduction. Let me just set the timer here. And thank you to my wife who drove uncharacteristically fast whenever the traffic would permit us. The doctor had not given me the permission to drive down from Albany in 3 hours, so she kindly drove me here. And as I was driving down here and also getting worried with the technical glitches and thinking about the ill health that Kannan Srinivasan is suffering, but still tried to, come here and then spoke from his home. I kept thinking, with the desperation that we have here, the desperation that the German Jews must have faced. And I'm not saying it lightly, I'm not exaggerating it. 2 years ago, when we were rallying in front of the Indian consulate in New York City, not far from here, the director of the Holocaust Center of Nassau County came and declared that India today is like the Germany of 1933. So you can see that this is something that is to be taken very seriously. You can also Google one of the largest newspaper of Israel carried a story saying Hitler's Hindus, the rise of India's nationalists. And now Israeli newspapers do not throw terms like Nazi, etc., or Hitler very lightly. And when we study fascism, we know that whenever fascism took root in a country, it could not be dismantled internally. It required lots and lots of outside pressure. Sometimes even a world war if a country like Germany went fascist. India, thankfully, is not a world superpower like Germany was. So I'm not saying that it will need an outside war, and I have to be very explicit and careful because the Hindutva propagandists always distort the words that you use. But what it requires is a tremendous and sustained pressure from outside. And which country in the world yields the most power and the most pressure? That is the United States of America. And that is why the Hindutva forces spend hundreds of millions of dollars here in the US. And much of the money is raised internally from their rich, practitioners in the US, unfortunately. Kannan Srinivasan had spoken about the roots of Indian Hindutva fascism. It's a religious supremacist movement which also is ultra-nationalist. So they derive their roots from both the fascist party of Italy and the Nazi party of Germany. They started their movement when their founders met Mussolini in 1925. So that aspect was covered by Kannan Srinivasan. Talking about their intended victim, the 220 million Muslims in India, the second largest Muslim community in the world, 220 million Muslims. A few million Ukrainians facing the onslaught of Russia has created so much problems of refugees, and is shaking the conscience of the world. So just imagine what is going to happen. When people, say that is impossible, how can they try to kill 200 million Muslims? Are they crazy? Yes, they are crazy. Extremists are always crazy. Just look at ISIS. It was very crazy of them to have occupied, a landmass and challenged the world. They could not have taken on the world, which they did. Hitler was a crazy person. He could have continued on to the oil wells of Azerbaijan, which was the intended target to get oil for his war machine. Instead, he went to Stalingrad and spent all his momentum there. So RSS is also a crazy party. Crazy in a very cunning way, because they have the experience of 2,500 years of practicing apartheid, where the caste system exploited the untouchables, the lower caste and the outcast. So they will not challenge the world like Shujat Khan showed the slide. It's so ironical that they use the image of Gandhi. When I came to America, when I landed here, I had tremendous respect. Not because of my achievements, but because of two people. I will say 3 or 4. One was Gandhi. His name was so huge all over India. Second was Nehru, who made India such a strong democratic country. Third was Ambedkar, who gave us that brilliant constitution. Ambedkar, who studied at Columbia University. Fourth was Abul Kalam Azad, who was the first education minister. And Indian, doctors and engineers and professors are well respected around the world. So the people who killed Gandhi and who are now ruling India, when they come to the United States or go to UK or Australia, they go to the Gandhi statue there in Hyde Park in London or, in the US, wherever the statue is, and they garland the statue and they use the name of Gandhi. Whereas in India, they are trying to remove Gandhi's name from textbooks. You will be surprised that in the state of Gujarat, about 15 years ago, when they took a poll, the middle school students, only 4% called Gandhi a hero, their hero, and Gandhi was born in the state of Gujarat, which was ruled by Narendra Modi. And 17% called Hitler their hero, Hitler who is not even an Indian. So you can imagine. So, and they say that they will make India into Spain. And they say that because India has similar history to Spain, just like Muslims ruled Spain for 700 years. And that era is considered to be a very, tolerant era compared to the times they were living in. And Spain was the world leader in sciences. India also was ruled for 700 years by Muslim dynasties, which made India a diverse subcontinent into a single nation, gave it a brilliant civilization, gave it a glorious culture, just like the Moors or the Muslims in Spain did. But unfortunately, after the Muslims lost power, they were completely annihilated along with the Jews or were thrown out. And now if you go to Spain, not a single grave of Muslims can be seen. You can see The huge mosques which have become cathedrals. So they say that we will make India into another Spain, and they have studied it and they are now practicing it. You don't have to take my word, just go and study, please, the reports from Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch or the bipartisan United States Commission on Religious International Freedom or the Indian human rights organizations or the news reports from Washington Post or New York Times or NPR or Guardian or Independent, and you will see what is happening. I mean, the tremendous pressure these Muslims are facing, from denial of jobs to denial of education. The girls who wear the hijab or head covered are not allowed to take exams or go to colleges or high schools. The denial to pray in various, cities, the constant attacks, the lynching, the massacres, the pogroms, where every few years you see tens of thousands of people being, driven away from their homes, thousands of women and men killed and raped. So this has been going on. Now they want to increase its intensity, and they have taken very methodical steps. That's why the Genocide Watch saying that India is standing at the cusp of genocide. When you take away the citizenship rights, just like the Burmese extremists did in Burma, when Rohingyas were called non-citizens, then they cannot go to school, they cannot marry, they cannot name their children, and they do not exist. And they can be exterminated or they can be driven out. So all these steps have been taken. They have built huge concentration camps already. So this is the condition of Muslims and RSS in India. And Muslims are not their only victims. Dalits, the outcasts who are considered as subhumans, untouchables, they are suffering same kinds of atrocities. Christians, their churches are being attacked. They're not allowed to celebrate Christmas, and they are being falsely accused that they are trying to convert India into a Christian nation, just as Muslims are. And people would not believe in the last couple of years when we say that, but now having seen the rise of extremism in the United States and see how followers, the extremist, white supremacist followers of Trump, how they believe all those lies. So if you just go to Twitter or go to any news story on India, critical of the RSS in New York Times or Washington Post, and just read the comment section, and you will see people sitting in the US enjoying their rights as minorities, as equal citizens. They are constantly attacking the reporters, etc. We saw that intimidation right here when Westchester Coalition against Islamophobia, which when I was living here,
10 minutes, 5 minutes ago.
Thank you so much. When I was living here, I had the honor of being part of this great organization. We started getting phone calls saying that this program should be scrapped, or when there was a conference, international conference against Hindutva, the professors were harassed. Female professors get rape threats in the US by people who are living in the US. Now they are so emboldened because why? Let me just talk about how they have slowly infiltrated the US. They first, conquered the Hindu temples. Then they conquered the professional organizations. I'm a physician. The Physicians Association of Indian Physicians is a very powerful organization. President Clinton, as a sitting president, came and spoke at our convention. That is controlled by RSS. So all this is controlled, all the spaces are controlled by RSS, and moderate Hindus are hounded here as much as Muslims are attacked. So they have also started running in elections and winning elections for school boards, etc., using the name of India and Gandhi. They are now in the US Congress. Raja Krishnamurthy, who goes and attends the birthday anniversaries of the founder of RSS, is a congressman who is trying to be the next senator from Illinois when Dick Durbin retires. So we know how powerful they are becoming here, and how a genocide of monumental proportion, which the world has never seen, a Holocaust that the world has never seen, of so many millions of Muslims and later Christians and others will. Buddhism was once the majority religion of India. You say, what happened to all the Buddhists? And you just go and read the story how they were exterminated or forced to convert back. So things can happen that way. So, the whole world should come together. And in the US, coalitions like Westchester Coalition should come into existence in every city so that we can put combined pressure on the US politicians. Otherwise, the money that Hindutva, millionaires and billionaires are spending, and the full backing of the Indian government, which is now controlled by the BJP, which is a political wing of RSS, and the business interests of the United States, because they think India is a big market, and India's geostrategic importance to the US because of the rise of China, and the good image of India that is there because of Gandhi and Nehru. All of these are being exploited. So to counter that, a small proportion of Indian Americans, whether they are Muslim or Hindus or Sikhs, we cannot counter them. What we need is all people of good conscience, Christians, atheists, Jews, Sikhs, everybody come together, and then putting pressure on the local politicians, putting pressure on the federal politicians to go after their funding, to see what's going on. You know, I mean, you see the biggest rally for Trump. One of the biggest rallies was in Houston, which was led by Narendra Modi, a sitting Prime Minister of India, doing an election rally for Trump. So you see the reach in the US, and the way to counter it is form grassroots coalitions. I mean, there has been efforts going on by some Indian Muslim organizations of holding webinars, which are unofficial gatherings in Washington, DC, or unofficial congressional briefings, which don't matter, don't mean much. And nothing had happened in the last 10 years. And during the 10 years, that small, tiny lizard that Shujat showed had become a great dinosaur like T-Rex. So we have to start taking it seriously, start forming coalitions with all the clergies of all different religions, with human rights organizations, with atheists, people, with everybody coming together and fighting Hindutva in the US and putting pressure on India. As I said, fascism has never been defeated by internal dissent, because dissent is completely wiped out. So the world must come together, just as we talk about fascism in Hungary, we talk about fascism in Brazil. Nobody talks about fascism in India, because Indian market, etc. And like I said, BJP, RSS is a very cunning supremacist. They are not crazy, foolish crazy like ISIS. They are very cunningly crazy. But the right is on our side. The Americans are basically decent people. That's why America had always progressed. People who did not have rights, women, African Americans, Native Americans already, they are still struggling though, but America had been a journey in progress. Hindutva wants to pull it back, but because of this great track record of good people in America who fight their own bad people, who teach their children, unlike in India, we teach our children here in the United States that things that were done to minorities in the past were wrong, whereas in India, completely opposite is taught. It's completely distorted history is thought about Islam, Muslims.
Time up.
Okay, so again, I end by thanking Westchester Coalition Against Islamophobia, and I hope that this good effort will be replicated all over the country. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ubaid. We're going to go to our final speaker, and then we're going to quickly go to our questions and answers. Just a reminder for everyone in the room, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and then we can ask your question in the room. For everyone who is online, please type your questions, and you can start typing your questions in to the chat bot starting now. Our volunteers will be looking at that, and they will come around to your questions, as many questions as possible. Our final speaker today is Deepak Gupta. Deepak Gupta is the co-founder and board member for Hindus for Human Rights. Deepak Gupta will be speaking about why nationalism is not Hinduism, the importance of Hindu resistance, and the dire consequences of not turning this hateful force around. Deepak Gupta will also be addressing the red herring of Hinduphobia and why fighting Hindutva is not Hinduphobia. So without further ado, Deepak Gupta.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak on this issue. Most of the speaking done before me is about how the Hindus or the Muslims are getting persecuted in the current regime in India. As the introduction was told, that my name is Deepak Gupta and I am a co-founder and the board member of Hindus for Human Rights. So now I am a Hindu and I am a male and I'm an upper caste. What is the problem? If Muslims are getting persecuted, so be it. What's my problem? I mean, I am safe and I'm upper caste. So it doesn't hurt me, right? Not really. And I would like to go into that how and why I am here for. Usually it looks like that the battle is against the Muslims, which it is. But right now, the battleground is the Hindu mind. Don't forget, Hindus are almost 80% of India. And this battle of keeping the country on the path of progress, on the path of being a secular, liberal democracy, is in the hands, in the minds of Hindus. And today, the mind of Hindus are getting hacked by a forged history. And Hindus for Human Rights as an organization, we are trying to fight this battle within Hindus for the right heritage and to have a better future. So we add, as in Hindus for Human Rights, we add a Hindu voice. That is the problem, the Hindu voice to the interfaith struggle for justice and plurality in India and in the United States. We are Hindus who are opposed to caste. That's why I started that I'm an upper caste, but we are Hindus, we are opposing the caste. We reject caste entirely and work actively towards the caste abolition. And we are building a Hindu resistance to Hindutva. That is what I am here for. We are building a Hindu resistance to Hindutva, nationalism, or should I say, a Hindu fascism. Now, the word, one of the speakers said the Hindutva word means Hinduness. Not really. There is nothing Hindu in the word Hindutva. Actually, it is everything opposing the Hindus. Hindutva is against Hindus as much as it is against Muslims. Now, why Hindu nationalism is not Hinduism? My three speakers before me explained that the human rights crisis in India. As a Hindu, I feel my heart broken that so much violence, so much suffering is done in India on my name. I am not for it. Not on my name. And the whole thing is done by the people of my faith. As Dr. Shaik Ubaid said, I won't say the Babri Masjid in 1992 was brought down by the Hindus. I won't say they are not the real Hindus. They were Hindus. So that is where the battleground is, to keep the right heritage, to keep the Hinduness within Hindus. The architect of the Hindutva ideology are not the faithful Hindus. I am a temple-going Hindu in America, and I can tell you with full confidence and experience, I haven't met probably very, very few Hindutva following Hindus in temples. They cannot even recite the basic mantras of Hinduism. So just because they have a Hindu name, they are fake Hindus. They are not Hindus, they are political ideologues, those who are using a similar name to propagate their ideology to pollute the minds of the Hindus. But they somehow, the problem is they have managed to convince the ordinary Hindus that Hindus are in danger and need to defend themselves against Muslims and non-Hindus. That is a truth we are fighting for. It is very easy to pollute the mind because of the human nature, that there is a danger. We by nature are wired to be negative. We are wired to think that way. So it is difficult to fight it back, the basic raw humanness, human thinking of having that, oh, you know, I am in danger. So that insecurity within Hindus have to be fought on. And HFHR is in that battle to convince the Hindus that there is no danger. If there is any danger, the danger is of losing your Hinduness. Now, I am here to tell you that there is no relationship of Hindutva to Hindus. Why? Because Hindutva is new, it's dark, it's violent, and it's completely against the Hinduism, which is very inclusive in nature. And that is why Hindutva is against the national building of a modern, democratic, and plural India today. Hindutva urges Hindus to take up arms. Hindutva is hyper-masculine. There is no space for womanhood in Hindutva. And Hindutva gods are without godness. There is no godliness in the gods that are propagated. They are more looking like movie characters. The Ram, for example, the Ram is shown as a Amitabh Bachchan style, which is not true. It is completely against the image of Lord Ram, which has been there for centuries. Hinduism teaches us that we are all one, that none of us are superior to others. In fact, we are all one. Hinduism valorizes devotees who see joy and sorrow of others as their own. And very commonly quoted, a Sanskrit verse that ekam sadvipra bahudha vadanti. The same truth is said in many different ways. Hinduism values peace and peacefulness. Hinduism teaches that God is without form and gender, and you cannot separate a male divine from a female divine. For example, a character of Bhishma in Mahabharata, a very great character, but he was falsely made to fight from the side of the majority, which was on the wrong side. And that is exactly what is happening, that under the disguise of Hinduism in danger, most of the Hindu people are getting on the side of Hindutva just because of that, because they feel their faith is in danger, which is completely a lie. And the current example, how can I say that? The current example, the modern example of what we are saying is true is our freedom movement. India's freedom movement started in 1857 with a Muslim Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader, and it ended in 1947, and 90 years of complete struggle where Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, people of all faith fought relentlessly against the Britishers to gain that independence. And why I am saying the Hindus are also attacked. It's not a fight of Muslims. I am here to fight for the Hindus. This is not Hindutva, this is a complete fascism. To give a modern and recent example, first they used to culprit, Pakistan is the problem. So we all have to fight. Now the Pakistan faded away, Muslims are the problem. Then, so we have to all get together. Now the Muslim is out of the picture. Now who attacked Shiv Sena? Who is Shiv Sena? They are all Hindus. Now they are attacking the Hindus also. That is where nobody will be left. Everybody is under danger. That is what is happening, and that is what Hindutva is without any Hinduism. Since Narendra Modi has won the election in 2014, think about it, a constant rage, deprivation among the Hindu community is there. Hindutva believers will call for a Hindu awakening. This is not Hindu awakening. Though this is not, there is an awakening of the worst of Hindus. And it will manifest in the worst way for a country like India. You cannot choose a path towards the north and think the country will move towards the south. That will not happen. Our collective consciousness is what the nation is. If we are thinking with the worst of us, then the nation will become the worst of us. I shudder to think that where we are heading. And I really do feel that. So, and this is nothing new. The most prominent writers of India, like the newspaper of Nai Duniya, the Prabhas Joshi or the Rajendra Mathur, they warned about this fundamentalism which is rising in Hindus, and they were faithful Hindus. And even Prabhas...
10 minutes, you have 5 minutes left, Deepak.
Sure, thank
5
you.
minutes, thank you.
So, Hindutva will destroy the fabric of India. That is what, as an HFHR representative, I am here to fight against that. The current Indian government is anti-Hindu. The current Indian government is anti-Hindu and it is anti-human. As we have been warned by the Genocide Watch and many other expert institutions, Hindutva will cause mass violence to occur. Perhaps a genocide of Muslims if it is not contained or stopped. And it will not be a genocide of Muslims only. It will be a genocide of Hindus together. Anyone and everyone who will oppose them will be attacked and killed. Hindutva believers are intellectually deprived, emotionally drained, physically and spiritually bankrupt. India is a nation marching forwards toward genocide fueled by hatred today. My beautiful homeland has been turned into a nation of hate mongers. And as a Hindu, I oppose it. As a co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights, my fellow inclusive and love-centered Hindus, because there must be an Hindu resistance to Hindutva. The consequences of not turning the hateful force around are too dire. And we are creating a space, a platform, a movement for Hindus to join in order to bring the Hindu community in the Hindu diaspora back to our natural state. And that natural state was for an inclusive Hinduness, which is inclusive, peaceful, generous, and open-minded, confident and sure about what we stand for and who we are. And just want to talk about a little bit about the Hinduphobia. Hinduphobia is a fake construct. These people are really putting that there. Hindus are no doubt targeted in the lens where they are in minority. They would be targeted in such countries no matter what their religions are. It is not against Hindus alone. So as an HFHR, I stand with the Hindus of Pakistan. I stand with the Hindus of Bangladesh. They are anti-minority discrimination, not Hinduphobia. There is no Hinduphobia. In American and other Western countries, Hindus being brown-skinned immigrants face racism and anti-immigrant discrimination. Sometimes we are confused as Muslims or Sikhs, and we are targeted as a result of that. Yes, there are times then where we face discrimination, specifically because we are Hindus. But these instances are very, very few. The term Hinduphobia has been constructed in order to Hindutva believers to peddle their ideology of Hindu supremacy. Hindus are thriving across the world. Hindutva, we will not allow anyone, Hindu, Muslim, or any other community to thrive in a liberal, democratic, and a plural India. I urge my Hindu brothers and sisters to wake up, and I'm talking of a Hindu awakening to love, not for hate. Believe it before it is too late. Hatred will ultimately engulf the hater. And that is so true. And I end with saying that today the Hindus are in danger along with the Muslims because their Hinduness is the battleground. And I hope and urge all the Hindus to think, read, and understand your religion, not from WhatsApp University, and stand for the Hinduness. And I stand with all my Muslim brothers in this whole genocide, and I will stand with them. Thank you very much.
We're going to take some questions from the room and online. I'm going to start with a question online first, and I'm going to come to the sir in the room. So, Dr. Gupta, would trying to remove caste altogether be considered by many Hindus as trying to change Hinduism, especially higher caste Hindus? Would they actually align themselves with the Hinduvadis if that is pushed strongly? The question from Zahir Adil. So to you, Deepak Gupta.
That is a very good question. Thank you for that. Yes, that is exactly what is happening. Your fear is truthful. Your fear makes sense. That people from the upper caste are very scared that if they will not align with Hindutva, then their caste supremacy will be threatened. But to believe it or not, since last 70 years, the casteism has weakened quite a bit within the Hindu community. And the clock cannot be turned back, no matter what people try. And why I can be saying so confidently? Because of the confidence and the awakening in the Dalit community. For example, there is an organization we all know about is called FICCI, right? That is an organization of the rich businessmen. But in the similar lines, there is an organization in India called DICCI, which is for the Dalit entrepreneurs. So now the clock will not be turned back, no matter how privileged Hindus try to do that. So yes, this is a temporary phenomenon that they are aligning for Hindutva, not because for the Hinduness. They are aligning to protect their caste hegemony. But believe me, it will not work because clock will not go back. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak Gupta. Okay, we're going to go to a question in the room. Sir, what is your name? Imran. Okay, we have a question in the room. Imran is going to ask a question. You can ask it on here.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Imran Ansari. I am adjunct faculty at Westchester Community College. So thank you having me here. So I have one question and one supplement. From the panelist, you use extremism, fascism as a fascist group, as an extremist group. We have to identify this group. Could you identify this group as a radical group, as a religious radical group, or a political radical group? We have to identify this. I would like to know from the panelists. As a young researcher, I would like to say that I did the textual analysis of Hindutva, who is Hindu. I have found the radical element in the literature of Savarkar. As I have seen the academician identify a radical group or religious or political radical group when we have observed the literature and their action full of ethnocentrism, ultranationalism, identity politics, and xenophobia. I found all of the elements in the book of Hindutva. So as a young researcher, I submit my master's thesis and I established that the RSS is a radicalist group, radical group. So we have to have summarized from the panelist because it is important to profile a group. So thank you very much having me here.
Can I take that?
Thank you, Imran. So
From my side.
can I go to Shaikh and then I'll come back to Dr. Gupta. So Dr. Ubaid, why don't you answer that and we'll let Deepak Gupta answer.
See, we are living in the West, and the terminology that we should use, we can use different terminology as long as we are defining what they stand for. And they use, you being an academic expert, you have very rightly said that they incorporate all elements, xenophobia, identity politics, but some of, for example, identity politics in America is also considered good. It's not a bad thing. Jewish Americans, especially for minorities, Jewish Americans, African Americans, Italian Americans, minorities, it is considered a positive thing that you try to uplift your own community. See, radicalization in India is a different term. Radicals, for example, Black Panthers were considered a radical element. So radical is not fascist. So radical has a completely different connotation in the US. So I will not use radical because they are fascist, because they met Mussolini and they formed their party. Then they started to admire Hitler. They want their final solution. They emulate Germany. So that is why we should stick to a term that describes them. They are not Hindus because they are not traditional. They don't follow traditional Hinduism. At the same time, they are not, I don't consider them anti-Hindus. I consider them anti-Hinduism. They are anti-moderate Hindus. So I think in all this, religious extremist, supremacist, and fascist are three terms that come very, very close in description, in my opinion.
What I would say, first of all, your question is so correct because it attacks the very question, very issue which we are trying to address. since you said that you found a lot of references in the Savarkar's ideology of what you're describing, but you will see that the Savarkar does not quote any religious text. They do not have any legitimacy from the Hindu religious text, but they somehow got this word Hindutva, which has a connotation of Hindu in it. So Hinduness or Hindu religion has nothing to do with Hindutva. The problem is just the word. The word brings that that vibration within a common Hindu. But that Hindutva has nothing to do with Hinduism, and they are not hiding that fact. They are very clear that Hindutva has nothing to do with Hinduness. They are not hiding at least that part. But the problem with the common Hindu is that common Hindu is not that culturally or religiously literate about their textbooks, that they can differentiate. Hinduism is a religion, a faith, and Hindutva is a political controlling ideology. There is nothing common between them. And that is the struggle as a Hindu we are facing, that how to use a language which a common Hindu can understand the difference. That is our biggest challenge we are facing in the Hindu battlefield. And we are still not able to design, at least in my opinion, a language which a common Hindu can understand and differentiate. Because whenever we go to the common Hindu meetings or conferences and we put this, the common question or the face we see is, what is your problem? Are you against Hindus? Because that word has that connotation. So it takes a lot of time for people to understand that what we are saying is against a political ideology that is not about Hindu supremacy. If it's about Hindu supremacy, then why Hindus are attacked? If since 2014, most of the human rights activists or anybody and everybody from any and every field, whether it's culture, it's writers, it's poets, the people who are put in jail are 95% Hindus. Why is it that happening? If it's Hindutva is not about Hindu supremacy, Hindutva is another word for fascism. There is nothing, there is no difference without it. It's not a genocide of Muslims only, it will be a genocide of me. It will be a genocide of HFHR, it will be a genocide of every Hindu who is against this. And that should be very clear to everyone. Just because ISIS uses Islam does not make him ISIS a favorable leader of Islam. Just because somebody uses the Quran on its name or on its letterhead, that does not make them a proclamation of Islam. And that is what we are also fighting. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Okay, we have Shujat Khan online who would like to also respond. So we're just going to enable your audio, Shujat. Try speaking now, see if you can speak.
Yes, I do hear you. And I think, just to wrap up this question with maybe a 30-second answer, the most intelligent, the research brains, I'll call it, in the congressional research offices and also the CIA have done a classification. They have written papers on, the nationalist movements over there and militant groups. As I shared in my presentation, the VHP has been listed as a militant group. And when that got published, I don't know if people realize that VHP from India gave an open threat to the CIA. Again, let it sink in you that the VHP from India gave an open threat to the CIA when the CIA had labeled it as a religious militant organization. So this work has been going on quite a bit, and we just have to go back and use those. If the respected gentleman from the community college who asked the question, there's plenty of research material out there. I just wanted to chime in and see if I can help you find some more credible sources of what you're looking for. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question in the room. We're going to go to questions online in a moment. But we're going to have another question in the room. Matt, if we could just pan to the gentleman who's going to be speaking. So we have a question in the room from, so what's your name?
Umair. So my question is in general to any organization. Like today, most people are learning about Hinduism or about Islam through media, and how the media is broadcast is like it's giving the impression to that individuals who watching that, okay, this is the real Hinduism or this is the real Islam. So why can't why can't we make media as accountable and whatever they are showing? How can organization create awareness to for the people to how can we stop and why media is not a source of truth?
Why media is not a source of truth? Okay.
Well, media is a medium, right? Media is not a live thing. Media is a medium. Whoever uses that medium successfully, efficiently, profusely is going to succeed. So again, the way Hindutva had studied Nazism, the propaganda that Goebbels did for Nazism, where most Germans, till the death of Hitler, most Germans were supporting Hitler. At one time they were not. But the constant propaganda and constant conflict, by the time 1945, when Germany it was almost known that Germany cannot be saved, even then, most Germans were supporting Hitler because of the propaganda. So how did Modi rise to power? I mean, just before the 2014 elections, with the support of Adani and Ambani, etc., all the main channels of, TV channels were bought over by them. So most of the social media, they are doing it in a very organized way. And, of the rise of media, if you go back, it was during the French Revolution. Before that, there were only three estates. The media was considered the fourth state because it's so powerful, so important. And it is the media, especially when the opposition is completely annihilated, a dissent is made illegal, media becomes even more important. So that's why they go after the media. They killed, some prominent media people, especially most of them were Hindus, and then they bought over the media, they fired the good people. So we have the ability to have our own stations from outside. In India, they will be banned. We have the social media opportunities, but for that we have to be organized, we have to sacrifice more of our time and resources, and we have been trying to do that. I mean, many of our organizations, even in America, when we are fighting the rise of extremism here, supremacy here, we do that. Unfortunately, in America, where the media is very strong and dynamic, in India, it is not. So it's a challenge for us. There's a YouTube lecture that I gave a presentation on using media, and I dealt with it at length. We have to have a media monitoring effort, a media response effort, a media relations effort where we are proactively involved with the media, the good people in the media, and then a social media strategy. So media, as you said, is very, very important. It's very critical and we should use it. So media is medium, as I say, if we don't use it, the bad people will use it and they, and they will succeed.
The thing is, to copy from Dr. Shaik's last line, I mean, they are using it very well. So they will use it, not, they're using it very well. And the why media is not telling the truth. It's all about resources. They have the ton of resources, which we cannot even think or compete on. So that is a dark side of truth. The good side and the bright side of truth is that we are in 21st century. No matter how you control it, you can only control so much. So the flow of information cannot be controlled so much. So now we have social media, we have YouTube, and people are coming across that initial shock of what is happening, and people were like taken back and they were like scared. And I can see it within the Hindu community also, that now people are fighting back. They are coming back to normalcy and they are hitting back. Yes, the process is on, and slowly but surely we are going to resist that more in a subtle way, not in an organized media, channels and like that. But that will be more effective because it will reach the people and it will touch the people's conscience. Yeah, thank you.
We have a question online. We're short on time, so we're going to be finishing up very soon. So we're combining questions that are similar. Two questions online that are similar, one from Maliha Ahmed and one from Ola Nasir. So I'm going to combine the two. The question is, how can we defund the RSS or HSS, as they are in this country, and how can we stop their infiltration and effects on US politics and our elected officials? The second part of that question from Sister Ola is also related to our elected officials on how do we educate our elected officials so that they can help us in this struggle and in this fight?
A very, very important question. That's how RSS can be defeated. When Putin invaded Ukraine, America did not declare war on Russia. It's two nuclear powers fighting will destroy the world. So how did they put pressure on Putin? Economic sanctions, follow the trail of the money, right? Go where the money goes. And tremendous amount of money is flowing from here to India and also some from India to here, to influence American politicians, to influence American institutions. Even they're trying to, establish chairs in universities so as to normalize Hindutva. So, and to succeed in using the economic means, economic measures, we have to have a good political strategy. Most politicians, unfortunately, are not very strong when it comes to ethics and morals. They will not have the spine to withstand, pressure from money. So the thing to do, that's what I come back to, forming alliances. When you take a few local pastors, a few local rabbis, a few local human rights organizations, and then the victim communities, and go and meet with the local media, and then they write editorial, and then you go and meet with the local politicians or the federal politicians, they cannot resist you. All the money Hindutva pours in still will not help them, because certain things are so well established evil, like racism, like Nazism, like fascism. So once we are able to prove that they are these, and it's just not a tiny minority of Muslims or a tiny group of moderate Hindus or tiny other Indian groups are saying that, it's the whole, ethical people in your community, in your constituency is saying that, no congressman, except, either he is a Hindutva himself or crazy enough, will not support that. So that's what we need to do. The infiltration is tremendous. The pressure, again, this also has to be, just like the economic step has to be a political one, a policy change, the infiltration has to be a policy change. I mean, America rightly investigates people who are coming at one time, if they had membership of violent groups, etc. Why are the people who are coming from India, 150,000 H1 and student visas, many of them brainwashed and Hindutva supporters, not being screened? Why are they getting the visa? Why are the Hindutva ideologues and demagogues and hate peddlers getting the visa to come and give speeches in America? That's a political decision that has to be made, that will be made if we put pressure on the American politicians. So build coalitions, to build local coalitions, forget about all these, fake, I call them fake briefings in Washington, DC. I mean, they are just used to raise funds. They don't matter at all. They will matter only if you show strength at grassroots. We are not strong enough. So when we hold those briefings there in Washington, nobody comes there. People get fooled. They keep giving donations to hold this drama, smoke and mirror show in Washington, DC. Forget about that. Do what we are doing today. Build grassroots coalitions and take them along and put pressure.
Very good. Very good. So we have, because we started late, we're going to finish a little bit late, which means we're going to finish in about 5 minutes. So we have one more question. What I've done is I've combined a couple of questions together so that we can finish up. Many of the questions online, and thank you for everyone who are typing your questions, and we still have about 70 people online, and there's a lot of questions. So we're reviewing your questions, and there's a theme on these questions are very similar. So if I do not mention your name, I do apologize, but your question is very similar to others. So I'm going to combine the questions and end with this one. We have questions from many people online who are asking if they are seeing a trend that in every country around the world, there is a movement towards nationalism and nationalism equating with one religion, not many religions, not the secular India that we know. So in the US, Christianity, in Israel, Judaism, in India, Hinduism, and we're seeing more and more of that. How do we counter that? And I think that's basically what we're talking about. But how do we counter that, knowing that Hindutva is just one of these things, but the trend is it is happening everywhere. So it is becoming the norm. The second part of the question is related to, sorry, I skipped my mind. So if you can answer that one, and I'll come to the second question in a second. So if you can just answer that.
A very tough situation, right? Everywhere you look. I mean, the whole of Europe, just about 10, 15 years ago, the liberal democracy was on the march. Eastern Europe had become democratic. Russia was becoming democratic. You know, India was a democratic country for a long, long time. You know, still it has some semblance of democracy. And then what happens all of a sudden everywhere? Democracy is on the retreat, liberal democracy is on the retreat. And this will continue because of, you know, it happens because of the human nature. We are afraid of others. Xenophobia is in our almost like genes kind of a thing. So it's very easy for us to be made scared of. So when the demography is changing and when the economic conditions are not as great as they used to be, you know, then it was already happening. Then you had the pandemic. Then you will have the climate change, and millions, hundreds of millions of people will be forced to move, whether you like it or not. In old days, people would move because human beings were always a migratory species. We came out of Africa and spread all over the world. But now we have formed nation states. So what happens, you know, in democracy, there is weakness in democracy. It's not a perfect system. So those politicians like Trump, like Modi, like the president of Hungary or Brazil, or, you know, the Conservative Party in Britain, they will increase the they will raise the bogey of this outsiders coming and taking over the company or the country. And then things, yeah, even in India, I mean, Muslims in India can never overtake the Hindus, can never overtake unless there's a mass conversion. I mean, but you know, the first thing by 2050 Muslims will be in majority. That's laughable. Not even in 50-50 Muslims will be in majority. If you look at the graphs, it's impossible. But India is the only place where you don't have demographic shift, which is manufactured. But other places, there is a demographic shift going on because the population is falling. So these things make it very easy for demagogues to spread hatred. That's why we need a coalition of all clergies, of all human rights people to come together and teach our community in our mosques and churches and synagogues and gurudwaras, teach them, give sermons. That is not happening in our classrooms. An American education system is one of the best in the world because we own up to our excesses. That has to be done in every country in the world. That, you know, this hatred is wrong. I mean, fear of minorities is wrong. You know, human beings are the same species, and when immigration happens, country becomes stronger. You know why India was the greatest country under Mughals, 27% of world GDP? Because India was open. Anybody from anywhere can come, and it was sort of a meritocracy. And now we are said that Mughals were invaders, even though Mughals had been living in India for centuries. And then Mughal was equated to Muslims, even though Mughals came and conquered India from Muslims. You know, before the Mughals came, India was ruled by Muslims for 400 years. So all this nonsense is being taught in India. Other places, there is demographic shift going on. Economy is on the downslide. Pandemic is raging. There might be more pandemics, and the climate change. Climate change is going to be huge. Next 30, 40 years, there will be mass upheavals. That's why we have to get our youth involved in this. I hope we do it.
Just to add to what Dr. Shaik Ubaid said, I will give a little philosophical answer from his very modern history of India. I mean, we have been talking in reference to India, so I hope that is okay. When 1857, the first war of India's independence was fought, it was led by a Muslim ruler, Bahadur Shah Zafar, and it was spearheaded by a common soldier, Mangal Pandey, right? Now, Mangal Pandey and Bahadur Shah Zafar, they both knew very well that whatever they are trying to do, they will never see the result of that in their lifetime. But they sowed a seed to fight that out. So yes, hunky-dory and good times are they not there. The liberalism and democratic systems are under attack across the world. That is very true. But I think that is our generational opportunity to give it back. And just now we have to, like what we say in America, right? Walk the talk. So fight for what you believe in. That is what we all need to do. And now India, I mean, as an Indian or a Hindu, right? It is my job to fight for democracy. In America, it's the job of a Christian to fight for democracy. So if we all fight for an inclusive, democratic, plural system, then yes, there can be a coalition of the liberal and inclusive people across the world also. That's what I take it.
Just a last question before we wrap up, and then we'll take one more in the room if there is. But a last question online, a recurring theme again. Many of us grew up with Hindu friends and grew up in India. My parents were born in India. We are now living in a time where we are second guessing each other, right? And the question online is, how do we win over many of our Hindu friends who are of the same mindset but are getting pressure from this ideology to conform with this ideology because that is true Hinduism? How do we win our Hindu friends back and over so that they are not stuck between a rock and a hard place, so that they can come back and fight this fight with us and stamp out what is Hindutva?
Okay. First of all, I would really like to thank whoever asked this question. Thank you so much. The reason for that is that I think that is the most important thing which we can talk as common people, whether it's Hindus or Muslims, because we cannot change the world, big things. But what we can do as a common person, that is the question comes commonly. And I'm very happy that question is asked. And the reason I'm saying is, when I go to most of the Hindu parties or gatherings, that is the first question I ask. When I start talking, we all go into a nostalgia period where, I grew up with Muslim friends. When my grandfather died on his 13th day, my father's Muslim friends came for that eating, and for that, the people asked, they are not Brahmins, why are you calling them? My father said, whoever my father lived with are his Brahmins. Why should I call a stranger? I will call the people whom my father lived with. So having said that, whenever I go to any Indian or Hindu gathering, that is when the talk starts. Everybody says, oh, I had a Usman Chacha, or I had a Shamsuddin as my friend when I grew up. That is where I stop them and I hit it hard. Where is Usman Chacha now? Where is that Shamsuddin now? Then the faces become grim. And then I ask the same question, will your son or a daughter will have a Usman Chacha? Well, a Shamsuddin will know a Deepak. If not, what you got by default because of your parents, are you fighting to get that back to your children? If not, then stop complaining about a nostalgia, which is just a good thought. If you think that was a thought was worth value, then strive for it, fight for it. If you cannot strive for it, if you cannot fight for it, at least try to create it. So that the coming people, every Deepak son will have a Usman, and every Usman son will have a Deepak in his life. That is the only normal way to change this hatred. Otherwise, we can give seminars and talks, but nothing will change on the ground. Unless we can do this small thing, it will not change. Thank you.
What I say might seem rude or exclusionary, but that is not my fight, because I cannot fight that fight. When the majority community is, there is a rise of cruelty and intolerance in the majority community, the majority community cannot go the route of appeasement, because then there is no end. African Americans do not have to prove that they are not criminals or that they are not out there to rape white women. They did not. I mean, Martin Luther King did not go that route. Malcolm X did not go that route. That becomes the fight. Unfortunately, I don't envy the majority community here in the case Hinduism, or the Muslim community when it's ISIS, or the Christian community in America, white Christian community when it's white supremacists. To make white people who are being misled, I'm not talking about extremists, good white people who are being misled, I cannot convince them. That's not my job, and I cannot, that's humanly impossible. I cannot convince them. It's the white people themselves who have to fight, tell them, listen, what garbage are you talking about? You look like an idiot, you look like an extremist, and you will bring the country down, and you will not make America great again, you will pull America down. So it is the part of this, the job, is the fight of the Hindu community, which they are doing. Hindus for Human Rights, their life is not easy. You know, Sunita Vishwanathan is hounded by who? By Hindu America Foundation. So this is the, so unfortunately, BJP has become so powerful, RSS has become so powerful, and they keep on increasing because of the good, excellent propaganda, and because they focus on textbooks and they're teaching all hatred, garbage in history, and also because India's economy is going down thanks to BJP's policies. So they have to keep coming up with the bogeymen, this here being Muslims, and then, so this is the fight which the Hindus have to fight and win. When it comes to Hindutva, when it comes to American white supremacy, that's the fight American whites have to come fight and win. When it comes to Muslim extremism, Muslim supremacy against ISIS or Al-Qaeda, Muslims have to fight and win that fight. So I hope that is going to take place in India, and we are, and Hindus, moderate Hindus win over with help from all of us. Unfortunately, in Burma, we don't see it as much. That's why the Burmese, they don't even acknowledge Rohingya as people. They are not even acknowledging that genocide. But in India, I have some hope. In the US, I have lots of hope, because in US school textbooks, we teach our children hatred and racism is bad. Unless that is done in India, it will be difficult. And I wish all the best to my Hindu brothers and sisters. My grandparents and my parents had excellent Hindu friends. I had beautiful Hindu friends, even medical college. And most of them are just going away. And I asked them sometimes, I said, what has changed? They said, no. Your grandparents came there. And then they asked a stupid question to, well, who was your grandfather? He was a Hindu. I said, fine, that proves my point. So what if my grandfather was Hindu? No. So what does that mean? He left Hinduism out of free will. And even if he did not, I am Muslim out of free will. I am not going to change just because my grandfather converted. I'm not going to convert back. So, this kind of medical doctors, they bring this stupid talking point. It doesn't make any sense at all, but that is one of the biggest talking point, which eminent Subramaniam Swami, who is considered one of the brightest mind of Hindutva in Harvard, who I consider as an idiot, he is saying the same thing. Who are the ancestors of Muslims? They were Hindus. So what? Does it make any sense? So this is what is happening.
Yeah, our ancestors of all of us were monkeys. So what, should we become monkeys now? That does not make any sense. He's right. But that is what you will see even with the IITians. This kind of nonsense is between the IITians also. That is so foolish. Thank you.
And if I may take another 10 seconds, if I'm allowed on that, this is Shujat Khan from online, if I could. If we think that this connection is, I'll say, teeter-tottering or breaking apart, where the first generation who's come here, the Hindus and the Muslims, are drifting apart, and one family doesn't have a Deepak Chacha or Usman Chacha. Go back to focus for a second on what these, I'll call it, I don't want to call them indoctrination camps, but in my presentation, you saw the effect of the RSS camps and how over a generation, the entire mind of people has been poisoned with this hateful ideology. Do we really want to wait another generation to see if it proves out the way it did? So I urge everybody to, understand, look at ASPAIRE, look at CAPI, come out, look at Hindus for Human Rights, understand what we do and support us, because now is the time to put in the effort and educate your local elected politicians and to try to put a stop on this any further in the good USA. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Shujat. Okay, we're going to end our presentation today. We're a little bit over. We did start late. I would like to thank our speakers today. Our speakers, Shujat Khan, who you just heard from the Coalition of Americans for Pluralism in India, Deepak Gupta, our co-founder and board member of Hindus for Human Rights, who is in the room with me here, Dr. Shaikh Ubaid, who's sitting to his left, the president of ASPAIRE, the Alliance to Save and Protect America from Infiltration of Religious Extremists, and last but definitely not least, Kannan Srinivasan, who was speaking earlier about European and Indian fascism. This has been the Westchester Coalition Against Islamophobia. Thank you for supporting our event today. Thank you to everyone who came in the room. Thank you for those people who came. I am extremely sorry for not getting to every question that we had. But combine questions. If you do have questions, you can email it. Something going to put an email in the chat room. If you have questions, or to speaker today, they will find it out to you individually. I'd like to leave you with hopefully now every Islam that the teacher of their lives
Is that me? I don't know. It might be me. I just also wanted to add, next Sunday, there's a broadcast on the crisis in India on the Salam Media Broadcast Network in Johannesburg, South Africa. That's next Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today.